One of my favourite ways of fishing for carp in the autumn is with little feeders. I brought you here to Barston to show you how to catch some truly massive carp using feeders as small as this. So first things first, where do you start? Now for those that know Barston, I'm on Peg 17, great area, offers me loads of open water, but importantly, I know there's fish in the area. Now when you hit autumn and the temperatures are starting to drop as they have now, it's cold overnight, there's not much wind and it's flat calm, location is everything. So I know there's a few fish out there, and at this time of year, you've got to be on them, they're not gonna move far. But being on fish can create its own problems, as in, it's pretty much flat calm. They're going to be very, very easily spooked, particularly when there's not many people fishing as there isn't today. There's like one guy down the other end. And I've got loads of room, which in summer, I'd be thinking, I'm going to pull all the fish into my swim with a big 28 gram large hybrid feeder, regular casting, build the swim up. Now, with that temperature drop, not much wind, I've got to refine things somewhat. So to kick off with, I'm going to go with a 30 gram mini hybrid. The reason being, I want to sneak it in. I've got a bit of experience in this area, on this venue. I actually won a match 2 or 3 years ago. And what happened was, virtually identical conditions, same time of year. I drew along here and the fish were in front of me. And I started on my 28 gram large. Love that feeder here. I feel it sits really well, loads nicely, etc. But it was just obvious, because I could see the fish. Every time I cast, they seemed to be pushing away from me. And the reason they were pushing away from me is the size of the feeder. It's going in quite heavy because it's big. And after a while, I'd had a couple of fish, but I just felt I should be catching more. So I dropped down to the 30 gram mini, 30 gram, because it still allows me to cast the distance I need to cast, which might be anything from 40 to 70 meters. But at the same time, really small and compact. So I can sneak it in amongst the fish and pick them off. And at the moment, I can see a little pocket of fish at about 45 meters out. So that's how I'm going to start today. So pellets on the feeder, 2 mil soaked pellets, small up bait because small feeder. I'm a big believer in small up baits catch big fish. Everyone tends to think big up bait, big fish. So little feeder, just enough pellets. So I'm giving a big carp a mouthful of bait. So it's what I call dobbing with a feeder. So I can see a little pocket of fish at around sort of 40, 45 meters. So I'm not clipped up. I've had no other chucks. That's something else I must mention. Casting out a bomb and looking for gravel or just trying to get your distance. When it's calm and the water's cold, all you're going to do is spook fish. They're not coming to noise. They're backing away from it. So this is literally the first time I broke the water, so to speak, today. So it's just an odd little bubble. I'm just going to try and drop it. That's pretty much perfect. Literally dropped it right in amongst where there's a few bubbles coming up. And while it's flat calm, I'm not going to clip up. I'm literally going to try and follow or find the fish in my swim. At the moment, a few little bubbles. I'm confident that's in amongst fish. I'm going to start the watch. I'm not going to leave it in very long because it's a tiny little feeder. And like I said, how I'm fishing at the moment works on the basis I want to drop my hook bait in amongst the fish. I'm not looking to like build a swim. I'm literally looking to follow them around, picking them off. And as a consequence, 5 minutes maximum on this size of feeder. Obviously, if I do like hit a pocket of fish, I'll then maybe look to clip up to try and stay in contact with them. But at the moment, it's a case of I've chucked in amongst what I think is fish. I can see a few bubbles and then we'll take it from there. But if it doesn't go around within 5 minutes, or I'm not getting indications, then I'll look to reel it in and drop it on another, where I think another pocket of fish might be. But I'm staying short as well. I don't want to be going to the maximum of my peg straight away, because once I've done that, the fish will just split left and right, and then I could be left with a column of water in front of me with no fishing. Hang on. That's a carp. But that's proof, if you needed it, of like, even a little feeder. People think big feeder, big fish. You only need a little tiny feeder when it's this time of year and the water's gone cold to catch a big carp. Feels like a decent fish. The Stampier's, I mean, it can be anything, but there's a lot of double figure fish. I'm not saying it is a double, but it doesn't feel a bad one. Like I say, a lot of people think you can't catch big carp on little tiny feeders, and at this time of year, nothing could be further from the truth. I'm convinced as well that had I crashed like a big feeder straight on top of those fish, I wouldn't have had that bite. Might have got away with it if there'd been a big wind on, but there's not. It's not a massive fish by Barston standards, but it's a lovely start. Looks sort of 6 to 8 pound. Little orange 6mm wafter. Woeful bit of netting. And the great thing when it is flat is it does allow you to see where the fish are. Like bubbles at this time of year just tell you everything. And that's exactly what I chucked on there, just a few bubbles coming up. And, well, I started to watch and we're on 3 minutes 58, so that bite must have been within 45 seconds. Great hook hold as well, middle of the bottom lip. Real nice looking fish actually. Probably, don't know, 7, they do weigh heavy at Barston, say 7, 8 pound. And a great start to the bite size. On decent sized waters, for me, there's nothing better than the feeder. The reason being, just chucking a bomb out, you're like almost casting a single hook bait into the abyss. Whereas with a feeder, I can put a little amount of bait in, so I'm doubling the attraction. Still got my hook bait, but I've got that little attraction of the particles, and I can keep chucking it about, looking for fish, but with maximum pulling power. Well, we've had a couple of fish, but with it being calm, I can already see the fish are starting to back away a little, and the other telltale sign is starting to wait a little bit longer for bites. So them first couple of bites were like 30, 40 seconds. The last couple, it's been like 4 or 5 minutes, which tells me I'm not chucking in as many fish as I was. So I'm just going to let this one go a little bit further. I can see the fizzings move like 5, 6 meters further. So they've not moved off far, but far enough. Slightly right, but not bad. It's in the right area. But when it's flat calm, it's a great way of being able to spot the fish. And like normally I'd be thinking, well, they definitely move, but I'm not sure where. But when it's flat, you can see them odd little bubbles popping up, an odd little fin or whatever. Because it's cold, obviously there's a few fish milling around towards the surface, a little bit of sun. So I can actually stay in touch with the fish a lot easier. Just by using my eyes, keeping my eyes open, just looking for the odd bubble. Sometimes when it's really, really cold, just seeing one bubble, that can give away like a whole shoal of fish. So it can be well worth, even if you start slow, just keep an eye on the water, looking for any signs of fish, and you need to go to the fish. You can't wait for the fish to come to you. Just going to load this one up. Ready. But it was just apparent that by catching 2 or 3 fish, I've pushed them a little bit further out already, which isn't a problem. Oh, that. So I've moved again then. I'm literally, what we're talking, like 27-second bite. I'm not sure if it's a carp or an F1, but my last 2 bites before that were like 4 and 5 minutes, whereas the first couple were in seconds, just like that one. And that's the difference between chucking on the main ball of fish and being maybe 5 meters short of them. Yeah, it's a carp. Because when I'm fishing this little mini hybrid, I am looking for quick bites, because like I said, it's dobbing, but with a feeder. It's the same principle as dobbing with bread on the pole. You just got to put it in amongst the fish. And that's what I'm doing with this feeder. One little mouthful of bait, little hook bait, dropping it in amongst the fish and getting an pretty much instant response. Feels a decent fish as well. Also, if you notice, I like to play the fish with the rod down low. Tends to stop them splashing about. I want to keep disturbance down to a minimum. If they start splashing all over the surface out long, maybe because I've got the rod up high, then that's going to spook the rest of the shoal and I'll end up chasing them all over the place. Whereas at the minute, I feel like I'm really in control. So I've gone that little bit further where I could see there was a few bubbles. Quick bite. I'm hoping to go back there again next chuck. Something else I like to do when I'm playing big carp is play them on the back wind. It's a personal preference thing. I've always been a back winder. The only time I ever use the clutch is for a bit of pellet waggler fishing sometimes. When you're fishing for really big fish. That's a nice scaly mirror. And the first run is literally like electric. But when I'm playing them like this style of fishing in winter, need every bite to count, I just prefer to back wind. I think it's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit smoother and I feel more in control. Lovely looking fish. 8-9 pounds. Which again shows if you're in a match, how quickly, just let him out, how quickly you can build a weight. Obviously, other feeders already loaded up. It's a case of unclipping. Loaded feeder on. And literally look for the bubbles. Can see them, same sort of area, so the fish haven't moved. Back in the same spot. If it was really windy, I will add here, I'd possibly look at using the line clip just to ensure that I was going exactly back to the same spot. But because it's calm, I can just do it off the bubbles. Okay, so reset and start the watch. And we're looking for another quickish bite. You know, and I wouldn't expect them all to be in seconds. The first one, when you move swims, is normally the quickest because they don't see it come in, so to speak. They're not spooked, so you can wait a little bit longer for the second one. I can't stress enough either how important it is to make every cast count. When I say every cast count is, you do not want to be crashing your feeder in. I like to feather it in. By feather, I mean just putting my finger on the spool and just slowing the speed of the line down so that when that feeder hits the water, it's not hitting it at like 100 mile an hour. Even with a little feeder, that's going to create a massive splash if you do, and a big splash is going to spook fish. So get that feeder, sneak it in, get it to just kiss the water, minimal disturbance, you're going to land in amongst the fish and then you're going to get more bites. That's been out just over 2 minutes and I've got a skimmer. Now that's not a great sign. I think it's a little skimmer. I better let it in case it falls off. Skimmer to me is not a great sign. So now I'm thinking them fish have moved quite quickly from that spot. Just pop the hook out. So I'm looking out there now. It looks like the bubbles have gone slightly left. So I'm going to stay roughly the same sort of distance, but push it left. Like I say, I'm really lucky today that it is lucky as calm as invisibility, but obviously calm makes the fishing a lot trickier. So I'm just going to stay well within my swim, but push it left. Sometimes rather than jumping out, a lot of people's automatic instinct in this sort of situation is fish and move, got to chase them further out. I'd rather like work my corridor slightly left and right and be a little bit more patient, because eventually I run the risk. It's different in a match, because in a match they can be penned into my area by other anglers. But in this situation today, if you were pleasure fishing, I run the risk of being at my maximum distance far too quick. Then the fish are going to move left and right out the swim, and I'm going to be left probably reeling in a few small skimmers and not getting many carp, and it's carp we're here for. So rather than just pushing longer and longer, which I do feel would work, I do feel pushing out further would get me a quicker response now, but I'm trying to eke as many fish as I can out of each move, rather than just like jump another 5 meters, maybe get another really quick carp. I feel like going left and right gives me a better chance of maybe 2 or 3 fish out of each move. Feeder choice. Now, firstly, for me, it's a hybrid feeder. The reason I love a hybrid feeder, it protects the bait. I just feel like it's vital when you're fishing this style of feeder that you know you're fishing effectively, your pellets or ground bait or whatever you're fishing around the feeder's got down, it's all on the bottom, it's starting to break down, and presentation is perfect. So with the raised sides and the bowl, as I like to call it, I just feel you always know you're fishing. Doesn't matter depth wise. Underwater showed that, obviously when we filmed underwater. With the hybrid, you get the bait down, the pellets start to break down, hook bait's the cherry on the top. So that's why I use a hybrid. As for sizes, once it starts to get that little bit cooler, I have a thinking behind each one. So let's start with the large. The large 28 is my favourite. I've caught so many carp on them over the years. But once that water's a little bit clearer, fish are a little bit spooky, I tend to use the large when I'm being more patient. So if I can't see any fish, but I've got an idea like where they might be sitting, or I know if I drop it there, I'm gonna have to wait for bites, I'll fish a large on the basis that I've got more bait on. So if I was at Boddington, for instance, it'd always be a large, gonna be really patient, fish long casts as in 25, 30-minute chucks. If I'm gonna wait that long, I need to know there's some bait around my hook bait, and that's where the large feeder comes into play. Then you've got sort of the medium size. There's 32 gram and 42 gram in medium. They're like what I'd call my standard feeder, just for sort of normal fishing. I tend to jump, I'll be honest and say I tend to jump a lot from large to mini. And the medium, I think I've got a 42 there. That's my distance feeder. That's the feeder that casts the best out of the range. So let's say the fish are just sitting 10 meters further than I can reach with like a mini or the large. I'll put the medium on, the 42. It's a little bit more aerodynamic, really flies through the air, and I can reach those fish. So that's my sort of feeder for reaching the fish. And then we drop down, right down to the mini. The mini is what I call my dobbin feeder, one mouthful of bait at a time. In terms of weight, I'll always use as light a weight as I can get away with, just to minimise the disturbance on the cast. So if I was only chucking 20 metres, I'd drop down to the 18 gram, 30 metres, 24 gram, and then if we're going sort of 50, 60, 70 metres, it's the 30 gram. So moving on to what goes in the middle of the feeder, and that's the stem. Now there's two types of stem. We've got the X-safe version, which is elasticated like so, just fits in the middle of the feeder. And we also do an inline version, mainly because elastic isn't allowed at every fishery. But if I had a choice, I would always go with the X-safe system on the basis elastic's a lovely shock absorber when you're playing fish, particularly around the net, and you get that last minute head shake. It just stops the hook from pulling out. So where allowed, I will always use elastic. We do two elastic strengths. We do the black, which is heavy, which is ideally suited for sort of carp from, I'd say, 2 to 20 pound. I've had 20 pound plus fish on the black. And then we do a white as well, which is more suited for like skimmers, little F1s, small stocky size carp. We also do different stem lengths, and my rule of thumb is if I'm fishing at distance, it's the long stem. The stem acts as like a stabilizer for the feeder in flight. So if you want to be accurate at distance or cut through a really nasty side wind, a long black stem or a long white stem, whichever you decide to use, or even the long inline, will help your feeder fly straighter, truer, and you can be more accurate. So don't think little feeder has to be a short stem. I'll often fish mini size feeder, long black stem, just for accuracy. Then we've got the smaller stem, again, just shorter range. Anything under sort of 25 meters, I'll switch to the small stem. So that's my sort of general rule of thumb, but it is a little bit of personal preference and what suits the situation you're in. Another beauty of the X-safe system is the little clip at the top. This allows me to quick change the feeder, so I can have 2 or 3 feeders loaded up, ready to go, saves time when I reel in. It's literally a case of clipping the feeder I've got on, off, clipping a new one on, and I'm fishing again. That allows me to vary maybe how many pellets I'm putting on the feeder, colour of hook bait, lots of different variations, but saves time, because at the end of the day, the more time you're in the water, the more chance you've got of getting a bite. Lastly, there's 2 different options with the stems. There's what I call a standard stem and then the speed version. The speed version has a little clip on the bottom, which allows you to quick change your hook length. So you might be thinking, I want to try double maggot, or I want to try a smaller wafter, or I want to reduce the hook size to see if that makes a difference. I will add it, a massive plus for this system for me is the movement it gives the hook bait. If the loop's fixed, the hook bait can get pulled away from your pellets or ground bait. So you're still fishing, but the secret to catching a lot of fish, I believe, on a hybrid or even a method, it's keeping your hook bait in amongst the pile of loose feed. And because of your loops in the middle there, and it can move, as in it can pivot, your hook bait stays a lot closer to the loose offerings, which I am 100% convinced gets me more bites. I did mention at the start the X-Safe system. Now, fish safety is massively important, and over the years, elasticated feeders in particular have had terrible press. The reason being, if you crack off or suffer a breakage, it makes it very difficult for the fish to get rid of the feeder because of the elastic system. Now, what we came up with X-Safe is if your main line breaks, you still lose your feeder, but with the X-Safe system, the elastic can just literally pull free from the bottom of the feeder. So the fish, obviously, the feeder falls free, so there's no weight there anymore, which is going to make the hook a lot easier for the fish to get rid of. What we don't want is a fish dragging that around, because that's going to be very hard to get rid of with elastic. But with the X-Safe system, elastic pulls free, feeder falls to the bottom. Obviously, you've still lost it, but importantly, from a fish welfare point of view, that fish is going to find the whole system a lot easier to get rid of. I had that 3.5 minute chuck with just a couple of skimmer indications. Rather than going long, as in 5 meters further again, I just slid it right, and literally 20 odd seconds. And I'm pretty sure this is either a big F1, and when I say big, I'm talking like 6-7 pound, or it's another carp, and it's another carp. But again, quick bite, which is what this fishing's all about. Whoa. This fishing is all about keeping on the move, being quite busy, but feeding very small amounts of bait and trying to stay in touch with the fish. Just to illustrate how quick that bite was, still got obviously the main bowl of pellets in the feeder. It was inside 25 seconds, which is what I'm looking for, because when I find the ball of carp, I should get a quick bite. But that doesn't worry me. Some people might be saying, oh, pellets are still in the feeder. Quite happy with that, because I'm not looking to feed the fish, I'm looking to catch them. So a few pellets stuck in the bowl, as long as my hook bait's free, which obviously it was, because this nice looking mirror picked it up. So as long as your hook bait's free, I'm fishing. So those pellets in the bowl, not a problem for me, and just an example of a very quick bite. Something that's really important with feeder fishing is having a little bit of patience when you're fishing for big fish on the bite. When I'm casting that little hybrid around and I'm looking to find balls of big carp, so where they're shoulder, I'm going to get line bites. And if a big fish hits the line, it can be quite a decent line bite. If the feeder moves, obviously I'll reel it in. But sometimes a bite can be very, very slow. So what I like to do is always give it that extra second when that tip goes round, just to make sure it's on, because when there's a ball of carp there and they're a little bit spooky, the last thing you want to be doing is striking at line bites. On the bait front, I'm a massive believer in keeping things really simple and using what I'm confident with. So I've got 2mm micro pellets, wetted down, literally soaked them 90 seconds in tap water, drained them off, leave them to stand, and they're nice and soft, bind, but most importantly, still break down. If you're ever worried whether your pellets are breaking down, just drop a little nugget, mold a little nugget, drop it in the bowl, and just watch to see how long it takes. That'll give you a good idea how long it's going to take underwater. To my pellets, just added a little bit of pink boilie crush. All that does, it makes me more confident, because I feel my pellets are a little bit different, gives them a little bit of extra colour, a little bit of extra flavour, a little bit more pulling power is basically what I'm looking for. But the secret at the end of the day is to be confident in what you're using and make sure you've got your pellets soaked correctly and they're breaking down and behaving as you want them to do. So that's the pellets on the feeder. I will add, this time of year, pellets for me will always outfish ground bait as far as carp are concerned. So if you're going somewhere and you think, oh, I don't know whether to use ground bait or pellets, pellets are the safe option. Then as far as hook baits go, little hook baits are king for me. They catch all sizes of fish, but most of my biggest carp have come on little 6mm baits. When it comes to colour, underwater, if you've seen the Guru's underwater stuff, that's a mind blower as far as colour goes. Chop and change. Don't ever think, cast out and you're not catching and think there's none there and just keep chucking out with the same colour wafter. Be prepared to chop and change, because one thing I've learned is no two waters are the same. So a colour that might work here might not work at Boddington or Medlands or somewhere like that. So be prepared to always think there's fish there. If I keep chopping and changing the colours, eventually I'll get it right and I'll start catching them. Still stayed at the same distance, or roughly the same distance. Bearing in mind I'm not clipping up. Because it's calm, I can do this freehand, as in I don't need to clip up because I'm literally following the bubbles and the size of carp. But you get a feel for the distance with a cast. As I said though, if it was blowing really windy, I would clip it up just for sort of peace of mind, because I'm a big believer when you catch one carp, there's another one there with it. They don't swim around on their own. Slightly longer bite though, this one again, and as I've sort of already hinted at, bite time gives me an idea. The quicker the bite, the closer I am to the main pocket of fish. Slightly smaller, nice fish, but a slightly smaller one. You can see the elastic there as well. That does that little bit of work under the rod top to eliminate hook pulls, which, particularly if you're in a match, there's nothing worse than a hook pull on the rim of the net. Nice little common, probably small by Barston standards, probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 pound, but a lovely fish at this time of year. A subject well worth talking about is how I load the feeder, because it's not just as simple as just putting the pellets on any old how. There's a theory behind it. So hybrid feeder has the bowl. I take my 2mm weighted down pellets and I put the first layer on really, really hard. I'm not fussed if that first layer comes out or not. I'm not looking to feed the fish, I'm looking to catch them. So first layer on really hard, so there's always going to be some attraction in the bowl. Hook bait on top. Always try and like keep it nice and central, but slightly towards the bottom, if you can just see that there. It's important. You know, I spend a bit of time moulding things. I want everything to break down right. I want to make sure every single chuck, my hook bait is perfectly presented. So make sure it's nice and central, but sitting slightly low. And then just enough pellets to keep the hook bait in place. Don't put that second layer on anywhere near as hard, because I want that hook bait to be free within 5-10 seconds. So I can get those quick bites. If I was going to be thinking I'm going to be waiting half an hour, I'd put that second layer on really, really hard, thinking it doesn't matter if it takes a minute for it to break down, because my bite time's 25-30 minutes away. But on this type of venue, I'm looking for fast bites with obviously the mini feeder. That second layer I'm putting quite loose. Not loose is the wrong word, but just firm enough so I know it's going to get to the bottom. It's only like 3.5-4 foot deep out there, but my hook bait's going to be free within like 5 seconds, so I can hopefully get a bite literally as quick as possible. If my little mini hybrid feeders don't work, then my next trick is literally to go to the opposite extreme, and that's chuck a big 28 gram or even a 45 gram large hybrid, depending on the distance I need to fish at. The reason is, if I can't sort of dob them with the little feeder, then what I'll do is look for the most likely part of my swim where I think a carp's likely to come from or could be sitting, and I'll go with the big feeder with a bit of extra bait on it, chuck it out there, and I'll be mega patient, taking into account I'm in the best spot in my swim, my bait's fishing perfectly, now it's just a waiting game. A great little tip for this style of fishing is the front and rear reapers. I'm using the mini reapers, but what they do is they free me up. By that I mean I haven't got to have the rod on my knee. When I get a bite on this, it's hooking itself. You know what I mean? It's going to pull the rod in to a degree. It's a self-hooking rig. So rear reaper, front reaper. I'm now free to start loading another feeder, keeping an eye on my tip. If I'm not quite on the ball as well, the beauty of the front reaper is it's got the raised arm at the front. It's going to stop my rod from being pulled in. So like now, obviously I'm pushing my bait on with a bayonet, I'm trying to keep an eye on the tip, but I don't need to be, it's not like I'm roach fishing. I don't need to be watching it like a hawk. Everything's nice and stable. I'm free to work, load my feeder, and the rod's just there. I'm fishing effectively. And if that tip does go at 100 mile an hour, that front reaper's going to save it. And that back reaper's just giving it a nice bit of support. But there's nothing worse than like your rod moving all over the place when you're trying to load a feeder because it's on your knee. That's why the front and rear rests are so good for this style of fishing, where the bites are really, really positive. And that was literally the perfect example of the front reaper pretty much saving the day. Something else that's really, really important with this style of fishing is how your hook bait fishes. Now we're talking wafters, and the secret to fishing wafters properly, I believe, is tub of water on your side tray. If you notice, whenever I'm feeder fishing, I'll always have a tub of water on my side tray, and the reason I have it there is to test my hook bait. What I want is hook flat, and when I say hook flat, I mean hook flat to the bottom of the tub, wafter sitting up and wafting. The clue is in the name wafter, it should be wafting. If it's sank or your hook sitting up off bottom, then it's not fishing properly, and that's why I have the tub of water by the side of me. So as for the hook itself, a lot of people think, oh, water's gone a bit clearer, the fish aren't feeding as well, I need to fine down. I'm a massive believer that carp find big hooks really hard to deal with. I think little hooks, they get away with it far more often. So for me, it's either a 10 or an 8. Yes, an 8. We've got an 8 coming soon, and only the privileged few have them at the minute, and I'm one of those. So it's a 10 or an 8 QM1. Heavy hook, little hook bait. For me, that's the ultimate combination. So when I'm talking little hook bait, talking like a 6mm wafter. Again, small hook baits will catch big fish, purely on the basis, everyone tends to think big fish, big hook bait. It doesn't work like that. Carp wise up and they learn very quickly. So you've got your tub of water, the wafter's on a bayonet, so it should be wafter up, hook down. That's, for me, is perfect presentation. As for the rest of the rig, we've got 4 inches, 019 N-gauge. I love N-gauge because it's nice and supple. Obviously a lot of venues ban braid. N-gauge is the next best thing for me. It's nice and supple, and it allows my hook bait to behave in a really natural manner. So if you're watching this thinking, well, there's no way I can tie the same rig that Steve Ringer uses, well, the answer is you don't have to. We do a range of ready rigs, including a size 10 QM1, little bayonet, 4 inches of 019 N-gauge, ready to go straight off the shelf. So there is literally no excuse for not fishing properly. Whilst I'm playing this fish, I'll just talk you through my actual setup, so to speak. So rod choice, bearing in mind I'm fishing anything from sort of 35 to 80 metres, 12 foot of Ventus. It's a nice soft action for playing fish. It's got plenty of power in the butt for casting. I've got a 2 ounce tip in it. For me, this style of fishing, bites are very positive. 2 ounces is absolutely perfect. Then if we work down, mini big pit style reel, just helps with distance and a little bit more winding power. Then that's loaded with 6 pound Pulse Pro. If distance was key, I'd just drop the main line down to 5 pound Pulse Pro rather than 6. The beauty of Pulse Pro is it's a great casting line, as in very low diameter for its breaking strain. And if you just heard then, if I back wind it a little bit, you'll probably hear it again. I've got a 10 pound leader of Shield. It's a really high abrasion resistant material, which is perfect as a shot leader. And the reason I use it is twofold. Most people will say using a shot leader, that's a beautiful fish for casting, which I am. So I'm using it to cast off, but also at the same time, when I'm playing a big fish back from range, when I hear that leader not hit the first guide, I know exactly where the fish is, and I know how many turns of the reel before it's in the netting position. And if you're wondering how I attach it, I literally overhand loop. Let's get this fish up a second. It's a really pretty fish. Overhand loop in the main line, and then a half blood knot, trim the knot tight to attach the leader. Really simple, very fast to tie, but at the same time, absolutely flies through the rings, so works really effectively. And that is a really nice looking fish. Proper, as the carpers would say, apple slice scales. Sometimes at this time of year, you might find you catch a few fish early, and then later in the afternoon, it just starts to die off and you can't get back in touch with the fish. They've split up, they've spooked. And when that's the case, you might have to try making it happen. And when I say making it happen, I'm talking about putting some bait somewhere. And when I say somewhere, I'm talking far enough out to give yourself a chance of a few fish. So let's take Barston. A lot of pellets in the summer go in 25 to 30 metres. It's an area of my swim where the carp are used to finding bait in the warmer weather. So by putting some bait there, I can stick this rod up at 26 meters using distance sticks. So I know exactly how far out I am. I'm on the perfect line. And also I can replicate that with my fishing rod. I can put some bait in there and just leave it. It's a throwaway line. What you feed there is entirely up to you. You know what I mean? It's more a case of putting some bait there. I'm going to put some hard 4 mils in a 7-hole Guru Exchange feeder, 20 gram weight, and literally just plug the feeder with a few micros just to make sure the content's staying to get out there. My setup for bait, you know, it's nice to have a dedicated setup. So literally let that hit the bottom. I've got a 10-foot Exchange bait rod, perfect for this type of thing, as the name suggests. Great for casting bait up feed. It's got a very fast tip speed. So I'm just letting that hit the bottom, make it empty. Then a couple of quick jerks, feeder's empty. That's the beauty of the quick tip speed that this rod has. It also has, well, I'm also using 016 Exchange braid. The beauty of baiting it with braid, gives a nice clean release of the feeder. So let it hit, let it get to the bottom, give it just a couple of seconds for the water to get into it. Then because I'm using the bait up braid, it's nice and direct, zero stretch, a couple of quick jerks like that, and I can feel the feeder emptying. And one last point on this, the Exchange feeders are tapered in design, the bait up feeders, which means they're wider at the bottom, narrower at the top, so they give optimal bait release. So for this type of thing, there really is nothing better. One last point on this subject is, firstly, quantity. I'd normally put between 4 and 6 feeders in, and also timing. This isn't something I'd be doing in the first, if I was fishing a 5-hour match or a 5-hour session, I wouldn't be doing it 1 hour in. It's the sort of thing I'll put in with like 90 minutes to go, leave it for half an hour, 45 minutes, and then just drop over the top of it, just to see if a couple of big fish have come on the feed as the light fades. Biggest of the day, I reckon 15 to 17 pound, and proof, if you needed it, that you get all those little things right when the temperature drops, and there's loads of bites still to be had.